And now you dare enter my realm.
Yeah, hold on, Illidan. Just let me make a new character really quick. You know, I gotta hit the server's kind of full at the moment. Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another World of Warcraft leveling challenge. And as you can probably see, this time we're venturing over to Anniversary to play on the Burning Crusade servers. And this time we're actually going to be playing on a PvP realm, despite the fact that I suck at PvP. And in addition to that, despite the fact that I barely know any of their quests past level 20, we're also going to be playing Horde as a Blood Elf hunter that can never use a pet. And on top of that, I'm also going to be adding a handful of other restrictions just for the fun of it. But just to get this out of the way right off the bat, as you may have guessed with the whole PvP server thing, as well as the thumbnail, this challenge is not going to be a hardcore challenge. Now, I definitely will still be doing hardcore stuff in the future, but at the end of the day, this particular challenge is mainly just meant as a temporary, more casual way to get me out of my comfort zone, while still forcing me to adhere to a rather unorthodox set of rules. Of course, we do still need to keep things interesting, so there will still be punishments for dying, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me just go ahead and explain the rules. And speaking of rules, since I kind of have a history of not exactly explaining the extent of my rule set very well at the beginning of a series like this time we're going to be a bit more thorough, especially since this one is going to have a few asterisks here and there. So just be prepared for that. Alright, we already kind of mentioned this one, but rule 1 is pretty simple, and it's that I can never tame a pet. Rule number 2, grouping is only allowed for dungeons, and each dungeon can only be completed once. Rule number 3, my character must be self-found. However, there are 2 exceptions here. One major one relating to the auction house that we'll get to later, since it kind of ties in with another rule of the challenge, and then a pretty minor one related to trading. And basically, I'm going to allow myself to give away practical items to my dungeon groups, like water or food, but at no point will I ever be able to accept anything in return. And this is pretty much just because this is really just for fun, and I'm not going to hoard my extra water if the healer runs out, just for the sake of an arbitrary rule. However, since the definition of practical is a bit debatable, I'll be sure to highlight any moments like these throughout the challenge, and if I do anything stupid that you guys don't like, feel free to call me out in the comments, and we'll figure out where to go from there. Rule number 4. Every time I die, I have to delete some gear. And just to be clear, just like last time, when I say gear, this pretty much just means anything in the character pane. So, not bags, since
Bags don't have stats.
But yeah, whenever I die, I will then immediately spin a wheel, and whatever slice it lands on will determine which pieces I have to delete. And as for the amount of gear, the general rule is that PvP deaths equal 1 piece of deleted gear, and non-PvP deaths equal 3. And for even more clarification, a PvP death includes any death that occurs during or directly after a PvP encounter, but before combat ends. And that basically just means that if mobs are involved, and I kill the other player, but die to mobs immediately after, that still counts as a PvP death, and I'd only have to delete 1 piece of gear. However, if I kill another player and then accidentally pull something after my character has already exited combat, even if I get 1 shot because I still have low health, that would count as a non-PvP death, and I would have to delete 3 pieces. Now, there is one big exception to the gear deletion rule in relation to dungeons. So if at any point I die within a dungeon, that still counts as a non-PvP death, and I'll still have to spin the wheel 3 times. However, I will allow myself to finish the dungeon before deleting those items. And this rule is primarily for the benefit of my group members, since I'd rather not be a nuisance and completely waste their time because I had to delete my weapon or something like that after a wipe. So just to be clear, dungeon deaths still count, but instead of deleting things right away, instead, the chosen slots become queued for deletion. And this also means that any slot in a queued state cannot be selected again upon subsequent deaths within that same dungeon. And as a result of this means that queued slots can technically be used as somewhat of a safety net during that dungeon, depending on how you look at it, but it will only protect me up to a certain point, since if I die enough times, I'll still end up completely naked once it ends. One last point of clarification here though, if at any point I place a new item into a queued slot during the dungeon, that slot immediately becomes reactivated, meaning that it can once again be selected by the wheel if I die again. But moving on, since this is somewhat of a PvP-oriented challenge, I also felt that there needed to be some kind of reward for killing other players. So, rule number 5 is that every time I get an honorable kill, I will also receive what I'm calling a token, which I can then spend to make 1 purchase from the auction house. And by 1 purchase, I mean 1 singular transaction. So that can either be a single piece of gear, a stack of consumables, or anything else, so long as it only takes 1 press of the buyout button. Rule number 6, crafting any gear or buying any gear from vendors is not allowed. but everything else from vendors such as food, consumables, or pretty much anything that isn't a weapon or a piece of armor is totally fine. And then last but not least, we have rule number 7. If an item is ever unequipped, regardless of the reason, that item can never be worn again. And as for why, there are 2 main reasons for this rule. First, this prevents me from swapping to crappy gear before doing something stupid to avoid losing my good gear, and second, it also prevents me from falling back on my old gear whenever I die. Now this doesn't mean that I can't stockpile potential backup pieces, but it does mean that these backup pieces can't be something that I've already worn and replaced. So, if I want to have backups, I'm gonna have to think ahead. TLDR, PvP server, no pet, mostly self-found, deaths mean I spin a wheel and delete some gear, no crafting gear or buying gear from vendors, no holding on to my old gear, and every honorable kill means I can buy one thing from the auction house. And if any of those slippery asterisks come up, I'll try my best to explain them whenever they're relevant. Cool? Cool. But now that we've got all that cleared up, let's go ahead and get into the challenge. And just to keep things interesting, this video won't end until I die. Oh, but I should probably mention that since this is the start of the challenge, and the first few zones aren't actually contested areas, I will say that we won't really be seeing any PvP just yet in this first video. But I will also say that the start of this series will be a bit faster than the last challenge, and for that you can thank TBC's updated XP rates, and also the fact that I don't have to sit there and punch things for 3 million years this time around. So any deaths you see prior to the whole PvP point of the series can pretty much just be explained by the fact that I'm a bit of an idiot.
Okay, so pretty much the only thing we gotta know to play a hunter without a pet is how to shoot stuff and then run. Now there'll probably be some extra steps to learn as we go, but so far that seems to be the basic idea. The only actual tricky part is that you can't actually do a ranged auto attack while moving like you can do with like a melee weapon. So you kind of just have to sit there and wait for the startup animation every single time. But luckily, I just so happen to be a professional at making barely functional weak auras, so we have a shoot timer. And all I gotta do is stop running a little bit before that timer hits the end, let the animation play, and then I can just keep doing that over and over until the mobs die. Although, these guys are all kind of slower than us for the time being, so I will probably have to start throwing in some CC once they actually get faster. Or I could also just use fences. What? These fences are broken.
Oh, I'm out of freaking arrows. There is a spot where you can jump off of this thing and live. But if you don't jump in the right spot, you die. I want to say this spot is safe.
Oh, that is so close.
Alright. That's the starting area, or at least the very beginning.
And so, after cheating death and using our incredible skills to master the basic technique of kiting, which I technically already knew but pretended not to know to make myself look cool for at least a few seconds, we were successfully able to complete the starting area without too much issue, and began heading onward towards Falconwing Square.
Oh, whoops, I forgot to talk to the person.
Anaria
Shola.
I'm out of ammo.
Oh, okay, let me go buy some ammo.
Alright, where do I get... Yo, they got Weapon Master here? What the... I can afford one thing of weapon training. I'm gonna wait till I get a weapon before I do that. Okay, wait, where do I buy ammo?
After picking up first aid and cooking, and then just standing still and making like 40 slices of spice bread, and then finally remembering that I was trying to buy ammo, we then get right back to questing to finish up the rest of Eversong Woods.
Okay. If I pull this guy, is it also going to pull Thalis? Yes, it will. Oh, no. Can I kill him and then run still? I should not have done that. That probably would keep the leash going. Just reset the rest. Just reset the rest. Sweet. The nice thing about not having a pet is that I don't have to macro anything. It's amazing. Look at them pointy knees, dang. Oh, you know what? We take this, import, treasure. Haha, tattered chest. That doesn't make sense. Chests tattered is like, that's for like cloth. You can't tatter a thing made of wood. I suppose I can check the shore for any of them. Aha, there's one. Carpenter's mallet, main hand mace. Neat. Ugh. How do people function like this? Wait, where's Murgle? Oh, down here. Level 9? We can kill a level 9. We're a hunter. We don't even have glancing blows. Oh, how didn't you do that? Wait, I don't have any two-handed weapon skill. That might be problematic for this fight. Oh my gosh, am I gonna... I love weapon skill. Oh, hey, a new two-hander already. Oh yeah, and this one looks sick. I forgot about this sword. Oh yeah, professions. What are good hunter professions? Gee, I wonder which one I'll pick. What the... That's not a vest. It's got arms. It's a crop top. Oh, that's complicated. Well, that worked out fine. Oh, that's our hunter pet quest, which we will not be picking up. Oh, right, I never did my talents.
Now at this point, you may be asking, Rel, are you just going to be boring again and pick the same cookie cutter build that everyone always levels with? And to that I say, no, why would I play Beast Mastery if I don't have a pet? So here's the plan. First, we're going to briefly dip into survival to increase our max range with Hawkeye, but instead of going further into that tree, we're actually going to swap over to Marksman to ultimately increase our range damage, but in the short term to prioritize grabbing Scattershot for some extra CC. But once we grab that, we then have a choice between continuing further down the Marksman tree for even more range damage, or swapping back to survival to buff our melee options and, as the name suggests, our survivability. As for which one I'll pick, I'll decide later, once I get a good feel of where I'm at. But anyways, enough of this baby starting zone stuff. Let's go ahead and get into a real zone, or in other words,
Ghostlands.
And by this point, we had successfully reached level 12, which meant that not only did we have Concussive Shot from level 8 to briefly slow enemies from range, but we also recently gained Wing Clip, which is a melee range slow with a longer duration that pretty much solves any of the mob speed issues from before by allowing us to continue kiting and shooting even after mobs catch up with us. And as for our gear, we'd managed to fill 9 different slots: a main hand, a ranged weapon, a cloak, a chest piece, some bracers, some gloves, a belt, a pair of pants, and a pair of boots. But enough about me, let's actually talk about the zone. And shortly after entering the zone, we then hit level 13, giving me another excuse to talk about me and my talents. And since we'd finished up putting points into Hawkeye, that meant that we could finally put our first point into the Marksman tree, and I decided to choose Improved Concussive Shot, which, once we fill out the talent, will eventually give the ability a 20% chance to briefly stun the target.
Rel, that talent sucks. What about the crit?
Huh. You know what completely fake person I made up to personify a potentially aggressive viewer opinion that may or may not exist in the first place? That's a great question. Wouldn't it make much more sense to go for consistent damage over inconsistent CC? Probably, but that's boring, and getting a random stun proc
It's fun.
Plus, if I'm being honest, I don't really care for either of the options in the next row of the tree, since the mana reduction of efficiency is not very efficient. And since I don't really need to be in melee range all that much, at least for now, I don't exactly think melee-focused talents like Improved Hunter's Mark are really worth putting any points into. So I'll probably just pick up the extra crit anyways once I finish with this talent. But anyways, after reaching Tranquillin, Tranquillin or Tranquillin? Who cares? Getting some nice new bracers, and grabbing all the quests, it was pretty much business as usual. Kill some bugs, kite an elite while we slowly whittle it down with arrows, get some new pants, kill some night elves, find an 8 slot in a chest, kill some ghosts, hit level 14 and get a new cloak while ripping out Murloc spines, find a new sword that's barely even an upgrade, right before getting a sword that's definitely an upgrade, despite the fact that it's made out of wood, and then turn in a few quests for a new bow, which actually has 1 agility on it, which, quick side note, is really weird to me, because prior to Burning Crusade, pretty much every single low-level bow never actually had stats on it. So I'm just going to attribute this to Blood Elf favoritism and go about my day, because good stat equals happy. Oh yeah, we also got another cape with 1 stamina. After that, we then made a quick pit stop in Silvermoon to train Eagle Eye, which is pretty much only used for scouting out mobs with really long patrols, as well as Scare Beast, which is, as the name suggests, a fear that only works on beasts, which would actually be a lot more useful than it sounds if I actually remembered that this ability exists. We then kill some more ghosts and a giant water elemental,
Probably could have played that better.
hit level 15, kill some trolls, get a new chest piece, murder a bunch of animals and some more undead, get a new great belt, steal some metal from a gnoll camp, hit level 16, kill some gargoyles in Windrunner Village. Wait a second, Windrunner? As in Sylvanas Windrunner? The former Ranger General of Silvermoon that later became the Banshee Queen and liberated the Forsaken from Arthas' control before ultimately betraying the Horde and helping the jailer wrongly send millions of souls to the Maw, where they were then tortured and used as energy to fuel a giant war in the afterlife and one of the worst written expansions of all time that completely ruined pretty much all the major lore that came before it? Wait, isn't this supposed to be a classic WoW channel? Hey look, new shoes! And hey, 2 new abilities. A melee ability that we can only use after dodging, and a trap that's really only worth using on enemies with lots of health. And now here's a clip of me using it on an enemy that doesn't have a lot of health. In my defense though, these Banshees are actually pretty annoying, because for some reason they have these really short cast times for a spell that does a pretty decent chunk of damage, so I figured bursting them down as fast as possible would probably be the best option. And speaking of annoying, Windrunner Spire also has some pretty annoying sightlines. So I figured I'd try and be a little bit creative and walk around the outside of the building instead, which, in theory, would also give me a great barrier to break spellcasts by popping in and out of line of sight. Unfortunately though, my plan was thrown off by the existence of this handrail, which would occasionally block my line of sight. But rather than just admitting defeat and giving up on a not very well thought out plan, since I'm stubborn, I decided to stick with it and just shoot while jumping.
Oh my gosh, I have made a grave error. I think I just have to go for it. Fantastic. I was not expecting to have to break out the wheel this fast. I don't even have it ready. Alright, let's check item 1. My belt. Let's check item 2. Oh, my chest piece. And chest piece again, so we roll again. Oh, wait, nope, it went to wrist. Alright, hopefully that worked. If not, then I don't know. Wait, that was... I just deleted the wrong piece. I'm so dumb. Alright, well I guess we're deleting 4. It was belt, wrist, chest. And I guess I just deleted the gloves because I wasn't paying attention. Alright, let's go update the counter. Very dumb way to die, but it is what it is.
Will Rel secure his revenge on the Scourge who sent him plummeting to his death despite the fact that it was all his fault in the first place? Will he ever learn to think before doing literally anything? And most importantly, will he ever actually do some PvP? Find out the answers to probably some of these questions next time on the Petless PvP Challenge thingy, where Rel deletes gear for some reason, and that I don't actually have a proper name for, but that I'll probably just keep calling Petless PvP because I like alliteration, and